In 1978, a group of 5 Mancunians came together and created music history. The first record they produced was a factory sample, the first ever recording on Factory Records. A label that would go on to issue hundreds of era-defining releases, many in iconic sleeves designed by Peter Saville, inspire 3 feature films, countless books. A label that would later create the Hacienda nightclub in the 1980s, give the world Happy Mondays and Manchester, and propel New Order to international success. But before all of that, back in 1978 Manchester, an idea was forming in local TV journalist Antony Wilson's mind. Co-founder Peter Saville takes up the story.
So it was Tony, as champion of the new music, who took it upon himself with Alan to find a venue, and that became the Factory.
The Factory in Russell Road, Hulme in Manchester, provided a vital venue for many post-punk bands, 4 of which ended up contributing tracks to the Factory sample.
Tony made this suggestion that we release a record, not with any intention of forming a record company, but just as a springboard of opportunity for those groups who we thought were good.
Antony Wilson was already well known in the northwest of England as a reporter on local news programme Granada Reports and as a presenter of So It Goes, one of the few programmes at the time championing new music, including the Sex Pistols and Joy Division.
Since the first caveman first watched the first prehistoric bird fly and wing his way across the skies, man has wanted to get up there in the clouds. The fence, the barbed wire fence! Good evening and welcome to So It Goes, a or perhaps the new music show. Sex Pistols, you can hear them warming up in the background even now. I am an antichrist. I am an anarchist. Soldier of the city where the roads meet.
Here's Stephen Morris from New Order talking about Tony Wilson's enthusiasm for music and for wanting to get things happening.
Tony liked music like everybody else at that time of punk, well, new wave as it was then. Yeah, he wanted to do something, he wanted to get involved, because that was a great thing about punk-struck new wave. Get involved, do something.
One of Antony Wilson's great skills was bringing together talented people. Here he is talking about his co-founders.
Factory was 5 extremely heterosexual men, all in one way or another in love with each other.
Another major character in the formation of Factory was Alan Erasmus, a television actor and friend of Antony Wilson. Erasmus was a key driving force behind the label, not only coming up with the label's name, but also providing his flat as the original label headquarters. Here's Tony Wilson on how the label came to be known as Factory.
It was Erasmus seeing a sign somewhere saying factory closing, and he thought, well, we'll call it the Factory, we'll have a factory opening. So it was actually Alan's idea completely.
Factory was just Alan's flat, piled up with records. It was just a bedsit. That was Factory.
Martin Hannett was a producer on many early Factory releases, including the Joy Division and Durutti Column tracks on a Factory sample. While difficult to work with, Hannett's signature production style, sparse, spatial, cavernous, was a significant part of the success of Joy Division, as Peter Hook describes.
Martin was a difficult character, but he gave us the gift of longevity.
Martin! What are you doing?
Recording. Silence.
You're recording silence?
Rob Gretton was a leading figure in the Manchester punk scene with his involvement with Slaughter and the Dogs and as a DJ at Rafters nightclub. He became involved with Factory after becoming Joy Division's manager, as Peter Hook recalls.
Rob Gretton came up to Barney and told him that he was going to be our manager. When he came along at the first rehearsal, and Bernard had forgotten to tell us, and this guy with glasses came in, sat down, just sat there. I thought, who the fuck's this cheeky bastard? Then Barney turned around at the end of the song and said, oh, this is Rob Gretton, he wants to be our manager.
Finally, Peter Saville, then a young designer from Manchester Polytechnic and creator of almost all of Factory's early iconography. Often famously late in delivering his creations, his designs gave Factory a recognisable identity.
They've finished it, they've spent a year doing it, and now they want it out. And now why is it not out? Oh, because Peter Saville has not done the cover yet. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I cared about the covers. They were to me an end in themselves.
A Factory sample was given the catalogue number FAC2 and is sandwiched between two other Saville designs, both posters for Factory nights at the Russell Club. 5,000 copies of the record were pressed. It came with a set of 5 stickers, one for each band, and a Factory logo. The sleeve design, with its nod to Manchester's industrial heritage, is printed on rice paper and enclosed in a delicate plastic sleeve. Antony Wilson explains the idea behind the packaging.
I picked up a Far East copy of Santana's Abraxas. In those days, in the Far East, they couldn't afford cardboard, so they printed the sleeve on almost tissue paper, which was then sealed in plastic.
The music on the Factory sample feels very much of its time. The late 1970s were marked by industrial unrest and inner-city decay. Perhaps no band captured the sound of the time more than Joy Division, who contribute 2 songs to a Factory sample, Digital and Glass. Both tracks were produced at Cargo Studios in Rochdale by Martin Hannett. Released 6 months before Unknown Pleasures, it marks the first time the Joy Division sound is fully realised. Two Durutti Column tracks form side B of A Factory Sample. Durutti Column, principally singer and guitarist Vinnie Riley, were among the first bands to sign to the label and would remain with them right up till Factory's eventual closure in the early 1990s. A year after A Factory Sample, Durutti Column would release its first album on the label. Titled The Return of the Durutti Column, it was famously housed in a sandpaper sleeve designed to scratch other albums placed next to it.
To the disco radio. 6 at my television technique.
Perhaps the strangest contribution to A Factory Sample is from comedian John Dowie. His 3 comedic tracks form side C on the second 7-inch disc.
Acne. All my employers want to sack me. They got no jobs for teenage jobs, with blobs and blobs all over their bizogs. I get the shivers when I stand in front of mirrors. It ain't no fun, the girls all run like pigs from a gun when they see me squeeze a big gun.
Cabaret Voltaire were formed in Sheffield, and their early work was marked by experimentation with tape machines and electronics. The 2 tracks here, Bader Meinhof and Sex in Secret, are perfect representations of the band's approach at this time. The alternative nature of Cabaret Voltaire meant they had a natural affinity with the early Factory records, regularly appearing on the same bill as Joy Division. However, they eventually signed to another famous independent label, Rough Trade.
Vor dem Untersuchungsausschuss des baden-württembergischen Landtages erklärte Vollzugsleiter Bubeck weiter, nach seiner Auffassung seien die Selbstmorde von Bader, Rasper und Enslin jedoch nicht zu verhindern gewesen. Er erinnerte daran, dass nach dem Selbstmord von Ulrike Meinhof auf Anordnung des Anstaltsarztes Gudrun Enslin besonders überwacht wurde. Um eine zusätzliche Gefährdung zu vermeiden, sei diese Maßnahme deutlich angezogen worden, als die Gefangene gegenüber einer Vollzugsbeamtin
The release of A Factory Sample proved to be a success, as Peter Saville recalls.
The wonderful response was that in a gesture of support, people bought that record. All 5,000 copies of the factory sample were sold. The money plus a bit came back. But most importantly, with the money coming back also came sackloads of demo tapes.
This response led Antony Wilson to believe that a record label was viable. In just 6 months after its issue, Factory would go on to release debut records by A Certain Ratio and Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. But it was to be Fact 10, Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures, that would leave the deepest mark, not only cementing the future of the label, but creating a seminal album that remains revered to this day. Here's a last word from the late, great Antony Wilson.
It was all to do with the sacred job of putting out records. I mean, it was this miraculous thing of music and selling it to people and being part of this process that you as a kid had regarded as the greatest thing in the world, and now you were doing this thing.
To the center of the city where our roads meet.